to be recording, so let's see how it works. On the other computer now, the camera is a little dull. Can't adjust the settings inside of OBS, so I'll have to probably figure out better lighting or something. Some other bullshit. you know. But anyway, or maybe we'll just leave it this way. I probably look a little better, in low contrast. Anyway, so a little bit on gravity and relativity, I suspect, based on the comment. Alright, in general, few things are moving speeds fast enough for us to notice relativity. Well, yeah, in general, it's because that whole Lorentz crap, where the line does this, nothing, 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 and then everything at the end. For large, slow-moving satellites, Newton's laws still define orbits. We can still use them to launch Earth-observing satellites and predict their motion. We can use them to reach the Moon, Mars, and other places beyond Earth. For this reason, many scientists see Einstein's laws of general and special relativity not as a replacement for Newton's laws of motion and universal gravitation, but as a full combination of... So he's quoting this from somewhere, I guess. His idea. Yeah, and I don't think his idea is correct, so that's part of this conversation. I don't think this has anything to do with the speed of light. It just has to do with real velocity versus what we perceive as velocity. So I would argue, I've seen it argued in other pages, that Einstein's equation is insanely complex, and it's supposed to be doing something simple, which is just saying because of this time warping speed thing, the relationship between Mercury and the sun, and it's by this Lorentz transformation, so it shouldn't be that complicated. But what complicates it is the truth is more complicated, in the sense that I'll use the metaphor or analogy of the basketball player, going down the court, and you could have a radar gun, and the basketball player is going one speed, but the ball is obviously going a lot faster because it's doing a lot more motions up and down as it goes forward. So its speed is a lot higher. And the same is true for everything that's in gravity. It's not traveling in straight lines, it's aleasing in its orbit, in its motion. We're being aleased right here on the surface of the Earth. We're being pushed down. We are accelerating. It's happening. The pressure goes through us into the ground. That's evidence of the fact that we are moving, is that we're pushing on the Earth. The Earth pushes back, which pushes our molecules and bits back up again. And so our velocity is much higher than what we perceive as our velocity in terms of being on the Earth and the Earth spinning in the universe and all the added up velocities. It's higher than that. So relative to the satellite, we're aleasing at a much faster rate because we're in stronger gravity. It's aleasing much slower because it's in weaker gravity. Ergo, the adjustment in time. So I think the truth is that simple. The other point to this is that one could assume that the sun processes, that the center of the sun's gravity does actually process, because there's things pulling on it. The Earth, Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, Mars, Pluto, they're all pulling on the sun, and they don't pull evenly. So clearly, I think it's just logical to understand that the center of the Earth's gravity is processing, and the thing that's closest to the sun is going to feel that the most, and the things furthest away are going to feel it the least. So another reason why you can think that there's a flaw in Einstein's theory is that Mercury isn't going that much faster than Venus, the Earth, and Mars. Twice as fast? I mean, it's not that much faster. And so there's no reason, based on the Lorentz contraction stuff, to believe that it could make that much difference, because it's still in this flat line part, and just couldn't make that much difference. And the fact that the Earth and the other planets are further away should cause their predicted orbits to be more off, because they're further away from the gravity. And so Einstein's theory, implies that this effect happens more to Mercury, But if you logically think it through, it should happen more to the outer planets because they're further away from the sun. So if the speed of light and speed thing made any difference, there should be some bigger effect on objects further away, I would surmise. But anyway, I'm just pointing out that clearly if the whole thing is just because the sun is processing, you could logically understand that the further away a planet was, the less the movement of the sun could possibly matter, because it's just a tiny bit of added distance and change in gravity. But something close, the little bit of change in the sun's center of gravity, could mean a lot to something that's close. So it's just a context is all. Alright, so he leaves a link to Earth Observer at nasa.government. Amazing people dislike your videos so much. Keep making them. No one on YouTube does content like this. Flat Earthers should move on to debunk light as a wave if they want to maintain any credibility. Well, I know flat earthers don't give a shit about science, so flat earthers should just move on to jumping off piers and drowning because they're brain dead pieces of shit. You know, you can't be stupider than to, you know, it's just such a, it's like worse than Christianity or something as an imbecilic truther theory. It's so bad. There's just no hope. A flat earther is clearly a compulsive liar. Nothing else. Alright, Wendy Willows, another fake name by the cowboy. General relativity predicts deviations from Newton's gravity at the several meter level in the lunar orbit. Yeah, whatever. Prove it. Oh, that's right, he won't do that. So millimeter level measurement precision puts GR to the hard test. Well, again, they're not measuring, you know, they're measuring position. And they've been doing that for a long, long time. So they would have noticed if there was some out of syncness to the moon. So, you know, it's just sort of idiotic to, you know. So he leaves a link to a paper that says absolutely nothing. It just explains how the laser thing works. And it was like a 2006 this was written. And they're talking about how they're going to try to find this difference and prove Einstein right. And there's no evidence that any of this proof arrived anywhere in the last 13 years. So apparently they failed in their mission to use this distance between us and the moon data to prove some point that Einstein is correct. And again, it wouldn't make Einstein correct. It would just mean that there is changes in orbits. And now I would argue that without knowing when the last time the moon was hit with by something substantial, the moon could still be vibrating. It could still be processing a little, based on the fact that it was hit by something big. But who knows? Alright, and he says again, so 2 comments in a row by him. No one is saying Newtonian mechanics is replaced. Yeah, there's lots of people that say it. It's just like lots of people had the misimpression that Steve Gould was critiquing Darwin's evolution theory when he was just augmenting it, adding, and that's all he was doing. And so a lot of creationists used Gould as evidence that Darwin was wrong, even though that's not what he was saying. For the obvious reasons posted in your quote, the question instead is whether they hold to all levels of precision, and with regard to that, nothing you quoted has any relevancy to the topic. Yeah, nothing you posted as a link has anything relevant to the topic. We've sort of gone over the general idea of what the laser beam's doing, and that's all the page basically points out is what's the laser beam doing. It's like what I said it's doing. Anyway, then the acorn says the cowboy, no theory is completely parsimonious. Everyone knows that. Theories gain credibility based on the evidence and their applicability to reality. Well, this applicability to reality is kind of a bullshit statement. And clearly the evidence has nothing to do with what people believe. So I would argue the evidence, the Eddington experiment was absolute rubbish as a piece of evidence. All of the galactic lensing images are nonsense, because none of them can be duplicated in all the places they should be. There's tons of places where the same shit should be happening. It's not happening at all. If the lensing that was possible by those galactic images was actually happening, the universe would be full of a bunch of diffracted light. Light would be coming from all kinds of weird places. We'd see objects in weird places. There'd be all kinds of bullshit going on. And none of that exists. So this has nothing to do with evidence. You know, theories gain credibility based on the evidence. The problem is the evidence gains credibility completely illegitimately. Just like the two-slit experiment. And lots of the radar experiment. Lots of fake evidence is called real evidence. And it's not real evidence. So I'd argue that all the evidence of entanglement is bullshit. So I disagree with your theory of what went wrong here. Theories gain credibility because people are religious kooks. And that includes scientists. They want to make the story interesting. They don't want the truth. The cowboy edit. I deleted another comment below this one because I don't want to accuse others of wrong things. I'm sorry. I'll just leave this thread as it is. Whatever that means. However, pointing out a contradiction in the basic rules of his theory, or having him say gibberish about Doppler shifts. I mean, what gibberish did I say? I could find no evidence anywhere on the internet, no experiment that demonstrated a difference in sound between the emitter moving and the receiver moving. I could find no evidence. I asked directly Professor Lewin to provide me evidence. He provided me evidence of Sputnik, which didn't send sound to the Earth. Okay, I think everybody should know that. Sputnik was not sending sound to the Earth. So it wasn't giving me evidence of a sound experiment that demonstrates a difference. Obviously, there was no difference for Sputnik. Whether we sent signals to it or it sent signals back to us, same difference. Same shift, if there was going to be any shift. So, again, you know, to say it's gibberish for me to point out there's absolutely no evidence of what Professor Lewin was saying, okay, no physical evidence, and there's sound experiments. You'd think somebody could do a sound experiment and demonstrate there was a difference between emitter and receiver. So why is there no available evidence of this phenomenon if it's a truth? That's a legitimate question. That's not gibberish. And then I would also logically just argue that if you understand the mechanics, you just can't account for any kind of how it's possible it could be a difference. If you understand that emitters and receivers are doing different acts, they're physically changing reality for them by having motion. All right, I say gibberish about Doppler shifts while denying the kinematic argument. There's no kinematic argument here. Again, your obligation is to point out to me why sound is different than light. That's the argument. I'm saying there's no difference. So, are you disagreeing with Professor Lewin? Professor Lewin says there's no difference in electromagnetic radiation. Doesn't matter whether the receiver moves or the emitter moves, it's exactly the same. Are you disagreeing with him? See, this is the problem with this communication. I ask you direct questions and you never answer any of them. Are you saying Professor Lewin is wrong to believe that there is no change in the Doppler shift, whether the emitter's moving or the transmitter in electromagnetic radiation? Are you saying he's wrong to say that? I thought people who would actually, let's see, the kinematic argument for it is not just some measly mistake. I don't even know what that even means. I haven't made any mistake that you've proven. I don't know what mistake you're talking about. I'm saying Professor Lewin is mistaken, okay, to say because his math does this, or whatever does it, he says it's an effect. When I say there's no physical evidence of the effect, you can't say it's true. That's all. There's no physical evidence, and it's an experiment that should be easily done. So why has it never been demonstrated to be true? I thought people would actually realize this. Realize what? Again, you're the preposterous liar but apparently not, as I had too much faith in people's ability to discern nonsense. So what nonsense was there? Professor Lewin says there's a difference. I argue that I can see and find no theoretical reason to believe there's a difference. And then on top of that, I can't find any physical evidence of a difference. That's what I said. What is my crime? All right? You lunatic. All right, original comment. Oh, so we posted the original comment anyway. I don't disagree. In fact, that's what was implied by both my comment and the link I posted. The quote you posted, for large, slow-moving satellites, Newton's laws still define orbits, is true for the purposes of most observations astronomy. But it breaks down at a certain level of precision. Well, again, and how can you establish that we can ever really have that level of precision? I mean, isn't it a little bit ludicrous to say, like, theoretically, where you hit the reflector can change by a few inches? You know, the reflector has a shape to it. And so you could hit the reflector in one location, and that'll give you a little tiny bit of difference. So, I mean, there's a limit to the precision of the experiment. You have to realize that. And the very same breakdown may or may not happen to GR, although it has yet to be observed. So again, you're just telling us that I think the theory of relativity is true, and I'm just arguing that if we could do the experiment, I think it'd be proven false. Okay, I think if you ever could make a light clock and put it in a spaceship, the light clock will be a speedometer. It'll sit there and tell you right in front of you. You'll watch the fact that the photons are not going to obey your rules, and go forward. They're essentially going to be left behind as your spaceship moves. The photons are not going to be paying any attention because they're not affected by the emitter and they're not affected by the receiver in terms of their path. It's just not affected by those things. All right, the Acorn says, you are fighting straw men. I mean, it's not a straw man. I mean, it's obviously a preposterous distortion of the truth to say all I provided was gibberish on the Doppler effect argument. I mean, the argument couldn't be clearer. He says one thing, I say there's no evidence of the one thing, all right, and then I explain why logically it can't even make any sense. Do you really believe you're going to get hit by less water if one guy's holding a hose right on you, okay? He moves away. Somehow you'll get hit by less water than if you move away. Do you really think that's possible? Let's see. Let's see. I haven't made any argument other than that no particular theory is completely parsimonious. I'm not. She's using some words. I'm not assuming your knowledge on the subject. It would be helpful if you wouldn't assume mine. Well, he doesn't even take into account knowledge. He's just so frickin' arrogant. I don't really care whether DraftScience videos are particularly good or accurate. Well, see, I mean, you should care, frankly. And again, this is just such crap. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, yeah, he's not accurate. He lies. I mean, what were you saying? I mean, it's just sort of bullshit. If you people had some kind of evidence that in some way I was trying to distort or pervert, I'm not the one quote mining evidence. I'm not the one sitting there pretending the single slit experiment doesn't exist and this doesn't exist. They are. Everyone makes mistakes, especially when you make an hour or two of videos each day. Well, I don't make that much. What I care about is that light doesn't appear to be a wave. The only way that it appears so is via destructive interference. That's the truth of it, right? Because constructive interference is perfectly logical. 2 photons go in, 2 photons land. That makes sense. But destructive makes no sense at all. Unless a engineered experiment is designed to make it so. And even then, the bars that you get from the double slit experiment don't necessitate that the light is a wave. Well, it clearly, you can just apply some imagination and figure out there could be lots of causes. Okay, I mean, their cause is so abstract and bizarre the wave breaks in half, turns into some different kind of photon that isn't a real photon, and then has a wave functiony thing that somehow collapses in some point in space that's completely arbitrary, based, well, not arbitrary, based on some sort of randomness that somehow was pre-calculated in the, you know, in the universe. The universe can do some sort of true random probability thing. You know, it knows what the outcome's supposed to be, look like, and it can make it look like that. I mean, it's just so Gremlins. I mean, I could say Gremlins. I could say the Snowman did it. I could say lots of things did it that wouldn't be even half as wacky as their accepted explanation. And clearly I'm pointing out that there are reasonable alternative explanations that have to do with the fact that the light is traveling through right next to a surface, and that we know that surfaces are complex areas of the universe. The surface between two structures, whether it be empty space and an object, or whether it be you know, two different substances, those surfaces are active. They can actually put, you know, you fuse two pieces of metal together, and that surface becomes so complex that it actually creates electricity when it's activated by temperature. Surfaces are complex areas. The photon's traveling right through that complex area, and is it a huge surprise that it's diffracted by that process? Scattered even? No, no surprise at all. All right, I'm not going to keep arguing because there's no reason to. Light has been metamorphized as a wave with carefully engineered experiments, and that's about all I have to say about it. Well, clearly they've clearly forced it. You can see the forcing. You can see how they quote mine the evidence. It's clearly the thing they want to demonstrate to be true. They have an end that this is somehow desirable, this wave function of light. And they've gone even so far where they take these radio experiments that clearly can be explained by jamming. I mean, you can't really argue with the jamming argument, right? Jamming's a real thing. You do physically know that this experiment has been done. Two radio stations, and you're right in between the two stations, and they're broadcasting on the same frequency, and you'll never be able to receive either one of them. You get nothing. You just get noise because your receiver can't possibly distinguish, because the antenna is saying, I can't tell this frequency, these two frequencies, from, I can't pull them out of this. The antenna is getting this, and it can't pull this or this out of this. That's jamming. And it's a perfectly reasonable explanation for what you see, because the geometry is exactly the same as wave interference. It's exactly the same geometry because it's completely dependent on phase shifts. So it meets all the requirements of being a circumstance where it fits the evidence perfectly that the solution to why the event happens, why it occurs, is because the radio signals are jammed. There's no evidence demonstrating why it can't be jamming. Now, beyond the increase in the amplitude of the audio signal that's placed on top of the modulated signal. And as I pointed out, when you modulate a signal, you don't turn the whole frequency on and off. You just modulate the top part of it. And so what the receiver does is that it just sees this top part, and the top part is this far from ground, and it just adds the rest. It makes the waves go the full length that they didn't have. It takes this little amplitude and it spreads it over the entire wave. That's the doubling. See, but that's a complex thing that has to do with demodulation, and nobody wants to really understand how demodulation works, so they pretend that, oh no, all the energy went to that place because of the destructive interference somehow moved the photons that way or that way or that way, right? And somehow the universe knows how much to go this way and how much to go this way, so it all comes out 50-50 in the end somehow. There's some process, you know, that we're not, you know, we're not let in on. So anyway, at least the cowboy was able to keep his keep from being obscene. See, he can talk to somebody else without being too preposterously rude, and even he apologizes, you know. But you know, can't do that when he's talking to me. This is a cunt, a gaping, disease-covered cunt. Anyway, so yeah, I guess that's it. There hasn't really been anything new. I did get rid of the subscriptions to the fricking debunking the flat earther people, because that's just such a waste of time. And let's see if there's anything new. Let's see, spinning black holes, not interesting. I mean, just silly. I mean, just make, you know, it's all speculation. You know, I mean, the whole idea of black holes, again, getting anywhere near each other, unless they're born next to each other, they just have little hope of coming from two different places in the universe, and black holes missing each other and ending up spinning around each other. How can that possibly happen? Nothing can get into orbits, you know, unless their velocity is destroyed. So for two black holes to get into an orbit, one of them has to hit something catastrophically large to take velocity, to change its velocity. Or it just can't happen. The two things just curve right into each other. It's the way gravity works. I'm surprised physicists don't know that. Anyway, how a sphere is created by magnetism. Vortex wave. Oh, please. Anyway, I mean, that Scientific Lee really shouldn't be able to call himself Scientific Lee. It's just bullshit. He's a frickin' religious kook. As is most of the chapel society, as Bill Gates says. The chapel society. Anyway. But yeah, so D. Hilster's going to have his live room. I guess he's going to talk about dissident infighting. Yeah, well, it's always going to happen, right? If you can't do your critiques of conventional science without adding, well, and I have this theory that the earth is expanding and the oil comes from the earth and the water, and I have this theory that blah, blah, and I have this theory. Yeah, if you can't say how they're wrong without saying something wronger, yeah, then there's going to be a problem. I can't agree with you because you're a nut. So yeah, when you say there's no such thing as charge, then you're done. You have lost all credibility. Your credibility is evaporated, you know, into the ether. Yeah, it's just, you just can't have any. The most significant phenomenon, really. Charge is everything. Without charge, the universe doesn't have, it just doesn't work. All right, anyway, so I guess that's enough. It's enough of a test, so I'll have to work on the settings here and see if I can fix things a little better, because this is a little more light really is necessary, I guess. See, you can't adjust the camera in OBS. You can't get to the, you know, contrast and brightness and all that stuff, so you can't do anything to fix the image. But the frame rate, like I said, is yeah, it looks pretty damn good. I mean, that looks pretty damn good. I mean, so maybe for the better frame rate, I won't care about the fogginess. When I use the other software, the simple screen recorder, the only problem is the other, you know, the program that works really well on the other computer in terms of nice image and nice frame rate. I get a real grainy image. Good frame rate, but grainy. So anyway, so it's always something. But at least look, it's mostly working on mostly cheap computer, so you know, I shouldn't complain. I'm not really complaining. All right, I am technically, it's got to be called a complaint. There's no way around that. But I just mean it's a sort of kind of complaint where I'm grateful to have what functionality I have, and I guess I'm just irritated because at certain moments I can have more functionality, but it doesn't last. That kind of thing. It's another thing about OBS, right? It has little glitches in it. The thing bounces. The .com stuff. If I do the background, I have to turn on the video card. I have to turn off some sort of frame switching option, or else there's a bunch of jitter in the background image, and then this camera doesn't. I have to load it in low resolution, and then try to jump it up to a higher resolution to keep an image, and it just goes black on me if I mess with anything. Once I got an image, I can't mess with anything because it's so glitchy. So that's complaining, right? But it's not a big complaint. It's just basic idea is this isn't too bad. I just would like it to be a little better. So I'm selfish, greedy. I'm human. Disgusting. Disgustingly human. I really hate that about myself. So, till the next time and such.